Alright, another video. Today we're going to be talking about dystopian futures. Are we living in a dystopian society, at least within the United States, or, or a case worldwide? Are there worldwide forces that are prompting us to places of conformity and to eventually isolate and alienate ourselves, from the rest of society, to inevitably control us with whatever ideologies that they have. When you take books like Animal Farm or 1984, both George Orwell's magnum opus, where you talk about we, or Brave New World, Fahrenheit 451. There's been plenty of these sorts of post-apocalyptic, utopian or dystopian visions of the future. Whether it's George Orwell's 1984, like it said, with the vision of European or American powers, big brother corporations, things like that, who are ultimately in control of what you think, of what you say, of how you act, down to the smallest micro level. And I think there's a case to be made that there are elements of that within our society. There's always been elements of that within our society, of specifically politicians or corporations. APAC has always been, there's been a lot of people who talk about APAC, and whether or not it's the Jewish people who are controlling the entire world to fund for Israel, and the religious backgrounds of that, needing the third temple built in Jerusalem in order for Christ to return, those sorts of biblical prophecies. However, I think that at least the psychological aspects of dystopian visions are already here. People are provided fear every day within news outlets, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, NBC, all these different news corporations. We don't really get our information from independent sources. People are constantly on phones, screens. Attention spans are dropping, literacy rates are dropping, newer and newer generations are having more and more difficulties when it comes to attentive reading, attentive writing, attentive listening, attentive speaking, clear, fluent speaking, critical thinking. And in my opinion, I think that this is a deliberate use of these people's power, of higher-ups' power, whether or not it's whoever is manufacturing these ideas. People talking about BlackRock, or talking about the military-industrial complex, where they talk about OPEC, or all these other different economic-based corporations or governmental institutions that force individuals into a specific idea, because of course, at least within a social contract theory, there has to be some restriction of your own rights to the state, but with as much maximum amount of freedom to the individual as humanly possible. However, people, corporations, institutions, governments, whatever you want to call it, have constantly enforced this social contract theory as a way to prioritize themselves above the individual's freedom as illusionary safety. When it comes to different wars, such as the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War, with the weapons of mass destruction, of course that was lied about, and those were fear-based tactics to eventually have people go to war. When it came to a lot of our isolationist histories, it wasn't until we were deliberately attacked that we then would move forward and deploy troops. Not to say that really those wars were, they were more justifiable in some regard, but at least with more recent conflicts, the more recent conflicts of the United States has been directly influenced by our involvement in it, especially after World War II. A lot of historians have said that the last justifiable war is that of World War II. Stopping the Nazis, stopping, eventually what would lead to stopping the Soviet Union, since the Soviet Union were allied with us, but not really for very long, and not really wanting to, other than, after Joseph Stalin was stopped by Adolf Hitler within their Molotov deal. Anyways, so yeah, you could say that past World War II, that there was really no justification for American allegiance, maybe for the Cold War, but even then, to the extent of the Cold War, the Red Scare has been looked at with disdain. The McCarthyian era has been looked at with disdain. SDI, surveillance systems, drone development within the Middle East, and then eventually the use of that between Ukraine and Russia, or IDF. Those have actively increased the amount of hostility between people within conflicts, and further distancing the war playing field, across coasts, thousands of miles. A man can be on a little touchpad device and can actively see an aerial view of his enemies, and attach a submachine gun to it and kill as many people as he possibly can with it. It's a different type of warfare, and the warfare, the fear on media, the constant overstimulation within our psyches and our thought processes numb us into a state of isolation and complacency and conformity to these other corporations and governments, to where we'll just keep giving our rights away freely. That's ultimately what leads to a dystopian society. It's the exact thought process of, George Orwell's 1984. Freedom is slavery. War is peace. These sorts of contradictory ideas, the warping of truth, the warping of knowledge into the belief structures of other systems. There hasn't been new ideas, at least in my opinion, that societies have tried to follow to make things work. We don't solve income inequality problems. We might create systems that think that they will, like communism or capitalism or socialism, or maybe fascism or totalitarianism. But these ideas, they don't they're refurbished, they're regenerated into other ideas that have already compounded within society. And I get that's how you're supposed to create ideas, but these ideas don't work. And we have to have something new, something more beneficial. Because these corporations, these institutions, the technological advancements, it's becoming too much. These AI technocratic sort of people that increase themselves, and say with Elon Musk providing himself with an unelected bureaucratic position within Doge and cryptocurrency, and then trying to have a sort of hive mind data brink or database where other AI, conscious, it's not really conscious, but with these sorts of programs, fusing them together to know themselves, so then they can have more of a market within the system and manipulate the market. Obviously, they won't tell you that. They won't tell you that that's their position. They'll tell you they're trying to get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse and all these things. But besides Trump and Elon and his whole cabinet and his whole administration, that's not even the problem. This has already been happening. He's just the full manifestation of a long ride of history between America or really any other nation, and that is their will to power, their need for the strong to oppress over the weak in however way they see fit. If you understand the psychology of why they are doing these things rather than the actions that are proceeding from them, then you will understand why the actions are being taken. Because their actions aren't logical, they're only logical to their own thought processing. Because for them, this is the logical solution. Yes, let's go fund Israel, let's go fund Iran, so then they're both simultaneously attacking each other. We'll say that we're with Israel as well, but we're also kind of with Iran, at least within our own OPEC oil reserves or our own financial and economic systems that we would like, and then increasing the stock market as much as we can for these billionaire trillion-dollar corporations, because ultimately that's what it is. As much as people would love to say that we have an allegiance with Israel, which we do to some extent, and I'll give you that, our biggest allegiance really is the fact that we have no allegiance. The American society has no allegiance, not even to itself. That's what's so destructive about it, is it will destroy itself eventually. All these other nations will eventually destroy themselves too. And in part they have. When it comes to their selfish ambition, when it comes to, European colonialism and European expansionism and slave trade and, or Spain trying to gouge for gold or, other resources, or Russia's, foreseen totalitarian dystopian vision that they were creating within, for a communist society, or Mao Zedong's Great Leap Forward, or North Korea's ever demanding dictatorship and allegiance to basically a Führer type. It's the same thing. It's not really anything different. It's just a cultural difference. I think eventually and this is just my personal opinion, so I really have no evidence for this, other than I believe that eventually that will lead to a one nation state, or one nation entity between all nations across, and that will then fully be the assimilation of one specific nation, one specific, maybe not race or things, even though these ideas have already been, tried. I think this time it will succeed, sadly. I think multiculturalism is dying. I think the stance of American politics and American independence, of what our framework used to be on when it came to the American Revolution, or the Declaration of Independence, or the building of, not so much the Articles of Confederation, but the United States Constitution. Those were supposed to be the founding blocks of, in my opinion, of multiculturalism, of allowing for religious independence, separation of church and state, the freedom of expression, the freedom of press, the freedom of, gender, sex, creed, national identity, these sorts of things. That's what is able to make us be of an American. We are a melting pot within the United States. That's our backbone, and we are taking that backbone and breaking it, shattering it into a million pieces, and then it will cripple us. We can't function without a backbone. We can't function without a working spine, and you're paralyzed. And ultimately, I think that's what the United States is ending up being, is paralyzed, by further separating itself from what traditionally were supposed to be those building cultures. Of course, we have blood on our hands when it comes to our early American history, when it comes to Christopher Columbus and, the eradication of Native Americans by the millions, our manifest destiny of expansionist and colonialist, imperialist enterprises. We've always had those aspects of our culture, right, within our culture, and we're supposed to get rid of those things, but a dystopian future is definitely within our midst, and this has been of a long chain of events that have occurred within American history, that have occurred within world history, and we feel the tensions building, not just within Israel, not just within Iran, but just within our spiritual psyches, I guess. We all feel an endangerment when it comes to the social and human conditions of life. We are constantly fighting nature and nurture. We're constantly fighting the barbarity in our survivalistic instincts to promote the survival for only ourselves. And I think these world leaders think that they are surviving when they could be living, but they don't want life. They don't want the challenge of putting the nuclear bombs away, of not detonating it, of not risking millions and potentially billions of people's lives if it is to go into a nuclear holocaust, or how many foot soldiers we're going to go deploy and against Iran. I mean, we've already listed a couple of naval fleets off of the coast of the Mediterranean Sea to block Iranian missiles. But, there's so much more to life than there is of living, or than of surviving. There is a life living aspect. There is thriving. It is more difficult. It makes you more aware of the things around you, that most people are merely surviving. Most days I am only surviving, and I try to live. try to communicate, try to talk about these things. Because if we can talk about these things, then we can further benefit ourselves and the people around us by expanding our minds to, potentially new ideas, to new solutions. But it seems that our world leaders are thinking that they have run out of solutions because they have run the same race, the same rat wheel continuously over and over and over again, and they will not get it right because they are still so hell-bent on accumulating as much power and as much resources as humanly possible, rather than unifying themselves to provide for better comfort or care to other people, while still maintaining the aspect of at least some challenging reward for people. We need challenge. We need not struggle, not like of punishment, but of perseverance. Things that are hard but doable, things that are not impossible to accomplish. And we have no fulfillment. And our societies provide us with no fulfillment. They provide us with some conformity, contentment for our lives. So do not be content. Keep striving for something more, for something better, for more light tomorrow, for more peace, for more hope. Be the difference. Smile. Be kind. Be compassionate. Love your neighbor as yourself. That's what you need to do. So, yeah. Love casts out all fear. Be the difference. Do not conform to fear. Keep loving. Keep protesting. Keep exercising.